I tell you what, I am nothing compared to these guys.
Not true.
You're younger, that's for sure.
A little bit, not much. I noticed that three of us out of the.
You got the message.
Okay, we got the memo, 50.
These two guys, not so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
well, I see that.
I represent Malaysia though.
okay. Right.
I represent Hawaii.
Let me introduce, if you guys don't know, Bob Rosas, Mike McKittrick, Howard Rees, and Larry Wood.
Woo!
Together, man, it's you guys have been there since the beginning. I think who was longer, Howard?
No?
Oh,
Well, what's in what? 67.
Oh.
Yeah, it's longer.
No.
68 for me.
68 for you, 69 for
Yep.
you, and
69.
69. So who was first, you or Larry?
He was.
Looks like,
No, Larry, no, between Larry and Bob.
Yeah.
So I knew all this.
So, what was, so Mike, Howard, you were first. What was your job originally when you came, where did you come from?
At a very early age,
No, exactly.
okay, I was born at a very young age. You want to go that far back?
Oh, no, just,
Okay, got it. I was working at Ford. I hired into Ford in '64. And then I used to vacation in California because nobody wants to stay in Detroit for a vacation. So every year I'd shoot to California. And one of the years I took my portfolio because I thought, maybe I can score a job out there. So there was an industrial design place in Orange County. I lined up an interview. I went down and interviewed. I was come back up to 405, saw the Mattel building. So I went, I think I know an engineer guy in there. So I pulled in, went in and they called him down. And he came down and said, "Are you looking for a job?" And I went, "Yeah, I guess so." And it turns out Ira Guilford had given notice that day that he was leaving. So I'm sure it looked like a setup for me showing up. So he said, "Let me see what I can do." So they went in. These two old guys came down. We spread my stuff out in the employee cafeteria. And he hired me on the spot. So I went back to Detroit and had a good time quitting because I wanted out of Detroit. And of course, later when I got back out, I realized the two that interviewed me was Elliot and his brother. I didn't know who they were at the time. He owned the place.
wow.
So that's how I got in there.
And what was your first job?
My first job was the Cockney Cab.
So you were right off the bat, you were a Hot Wheels designer.
Yeah, I was hired in full-time. It was me back then. So we used a couple outside temp guys, but I was the only designer at the time. I replaced Ira. We crossed over. Ira stayed on for a few months. So a couple of cars I did were combined with him. And then it was just me after that. So like I say, we used a few outside guys. So Elliot came in and just gave me free rein. He said, "Let's see what you can do." So when I was with Ford, they sent me to England for a year. So I loved England. Every time I'd go into London, I'd ride around these silly little cabs. And I got to know them really well. It was fun. And then one of the guys at Ford of England had one of these taxis that he'd restored. So we'd go to the pubs and everything. So when I get to Mattel, I'm thinking, that was neat, that little car. So I sat down and we did the Cockney Cab. That was the first one. And that was a fun project. Elliot liked it. So I guess I passed the test.
Yeah, you didn't have the issues that Harry Bradley had.
No.
He had to break the ground.
Yeah. Harry was the groundbreaker. He came in and went through that.
So
Time
then
I came in, it was cushy.
when did you show up?
Me?
Yeah.
How much time do we have? Okay. My career is entirely at Mattel. I started a summer job out of high school, 18 years old, at Mattel. I went to my local, looking for work. And I found a job at Mattel in the factory. Again, I was 18 years old, and my job was called utility man. I loaded the bins, and the ladies did all the assembly. And that first job was Hot Wheels. It was a pack out, a 5-track pack out with the 5 joiners, okay? So for weeks, I was in the factory just loading bins. After several weeks in the factory, I found out you can move up the ladder. I was in the union. I had to join the union. It was a rubber, linoleum, and corporate union, okay? And so everything was based on seniority. So I wound up working in the warehouse for a few weeks. That's receiving inspection. That's where raw goods would come in. It's the first time I saw Hot Wheels in master cartons coming in from Hong Kong. And just raw pot and also finished goods going out. I was trying to get into the admin side of Mattel for a while now, and I finally got a job away from the factory, but now into admin. So my job was now an expediter, probably the lowest level paid admin there is. And my job was to take inventory of Hot Wheels every night, midnight, graveyard shift. That was my job, because I had my clipboard, I'd have the list of all the cars, all the raw parts, and I took inventory every night. Because back then, Hot Wheels was on such a growth pattern that production would make cars faster than you could bring parts in. So I had to keep track of, the flow of parts coming in. But that was my job for several months. In fact, in 1969, I recall on graveyard shift, taking a break around 2 in the morning, watching part of the moon landing on TV. A guy brought the TV in. You should see that. That was kind of fun. Anyway, so the early part of my career was in Hot Wheels, seeing the production floor, seeing how all the cars were made. And one thing I recall, the early cars, there was this matrix, it's called like a spreadsheet, where every car of the first 16 had to be 3 different colors of the palette of colors that were available. And again, production would go make things whenever they could. At one time they had a palette of, let's say, Barracudas in the wrong color. So they had to go to QC to get a deviation. They bought it off, otherwise they'd have to scrap the parts, clean them up, and repaint them the correct color. So after 2 or 3 times of a deviation, Mattel management said, okay, you know what, forget it. Every car, every color, doesn't matter. When new colors were introduced, one color in particular called cerise, that's the hot pink color, okay? When that came out, I recall seeing a palette of 57 T-Birds painted. Now back then, the only deco was headlight paint, grill paint, and black tonneau cover, paint and so on. And so one time I saw this palette of T-Birds painted with red taillight paint, and they noticed that, you know what, you can't really see the taillight on cerise. So they decided, as a cost reduction, any car painted cerise that has taillight paint, no need to taillight paint. So what I'm saying is there might be some 57 T-Birds out there with and without taillight paint. So that's a little something there.
So did you see any buses?
Actually, I did. I did. I saw the first shots, meaning the raw die cast. I mean, when I say raw, I mean with the rudders and all the flash and everything of that famous, Volkswagen in the industrial engineering department. They were there. I picked them up, played with them a little bit. Who would have thought?
But they were toys.
They were toys. Who would have
Yeah.
thought that would be the Holy Grail?
Nobody
In my
thought-
desk, I had handfuls of surfboards for the Diora. That's how it was like back then. So that's my time early on. And then as I moved up into the admin side of things, I wound up working in the planning group. That was my first exposure to R&D, seeing what these guys did. Okay? To me, it was like arts and crafts I couldn't believe. And my job there was to walk around my clipboard and go to these guys and say, are you following the schedule? It was really the schedule control, basically. So that was in '72. I was there 4 years, from factory to the early admin and then to planning. And then I quit because I was going to JC. I was taking architecture at school, so I quit to become a draftsman. That lasted 4 years. I came back in '76 as an entry-level engineer, and I never looked back. My first engineering project was for Big Jim. That's Mattel's answer to G.I. Joe back in the day. I moved into various departments. In one department was where I engineered my very first Hot Wheels project, the scorcher chamber, the first one. The one that looks like a trash can, a pure trash can. That was my first Hot Wheels project. And
I got that.
yeah, I have one too in the garage, or I have one. Anyway, I also worked on another project, a more complicated project called Bad Gunner. It's a motorcycle with a flywheel and a spring action. That's the first time I met Larry, because Larry actually did the artwork for the gas tank for that project. Since then, I've worked on other Hot Wheels projects. I've engineered the first 3 Stone Go sets, the service center, the city center, and the construction site. And you know, we have labels on all these sets.
Right, I wanted to ask you that, because you and I had talked about
Yeah,
that.
okay, so on the service center, the first one, one of the buildings says Mike's Transmissions. That's a little inside joke to me, because I have a British sports car and I had trouble with my transmission at the time, so it was Mike's Transmissions, okay? And then, of course, at the very middle is Larry's Towing. He's on there too. And I think on the third set, the construction site, there was another label for me. It said McKittrick Welding, because my exhaust system had problems, so it was McKittrick Welding. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then the last thing I engineered in '83 was the Speed Shifter 500. That's the yellow teardrop shaped track. So that's the last thing I engineered. And then, if I may, just to continue, in 2000, working up my ladder in engineering manager and then director, I had a chance to replace George Salakis in Malaysia, where he ended up PPD. And so I toured for George in 2000, and we're doing Hot Wheels. And it was just a great experience to work there for 7 years in head of the development group before I retired. So I started in Hot Wheels in factory, and I finished Hot Wheels as far as the development group. More stuff to share on that a little bit later.
Larry, right?
I think everybody knows more than I do.
Yeah.
So I was at Ford and Company designing door handles and grills and stuff. And it wasn't that got me, because we partied pretty heavy back then. In fact, we were pretty famous. We were written up in all the magazines as a dope house and everything, but it wasn't. It was just a bunch of guys. We would put flyers on all the girls' colleges. And if the girls showed up, the guys showed up. And of course, everybody drove a wild car, and they would all park on our street. We got so out of control, we ended up renting a house in downtown Detroit with 4 stories. And it even had a bowling alley on the top floor. It was such a neat place. But it wasn't a bad neighborhood, so it was cheap, and we could party all we wanted, and the cops didn't care. So that was, we had a great time, so I had no problem working in Detroit. But the weather, I couldn't drive my motorcycle, I couldn't work on my hot rod, and so I said, I'm going to try to get to California. I heard about a job in Detroit. I was going to California, and it was a company called Sunbird Ferrara. It was an industrial design building. And I went over there and knocked on the door. I says, I'll work for you. Will you send me to California to work? It was on the L-1011 airplane Imperial. And they said, well, we don't know what you do, so you come here and work for a month, and then we'll send you to California. I said, fair enough. What was weird was that when I left Ford, I left at noon. And I went over there, and of course at Ford, if you did anything at noon, you had the rest of the day off, so you could goof around. So I walked in not thinking. I said, I'm here. They said, okay, you're going to work. You got a presentation to Sears tomorrow on tractors. I got to work all night? Yeah, that's your job. So I ended up drawing tractors, and I think I got the first tractor with headlights on it, so that was kind of fun. I did jukeboxes, I did door handles for refrigerators, I did all sorts of stuff. After a month, I went into the boss's office, and I said, okay, I'm going to California. Am I working for you, or am I on my own? He says, okay, here's your ticket to California. Well, when Ford hired me, they shipped my car, they shipped my motorcycle, they took all the parts and sent them took back to Detroit, and sent my roommates 40 Ford and everything. So here's this guy who gives me one ticket. I said, wait a minute, I got 2 cars, I got a wife, I got all this stuff. And they said, well, you got to be in California tomorrow because you're going to work. So I got on an airplane, went to Lockheed out in the valley, started doing aircraft stuff, and I just ended up flying back to Detroit, renting the biggest car I could get, and filling it full of my stuff and driving cross country. That's another story, fun story. And then I jumped in my 63 Corvette and drove all the way across country, and that's another story. 63 split window, big tires. If that thing had hit a drop of water, I'd been in the ditch. And luckily I made it all the way to California January 3rd without a spot of rain or snow. So that was pure luck. I did that trip later on in a truck, and I got caught in the world's worst snowstorm. Luckily it wasn't the Corvette. So I ended up in California working at Lockheed. And one day I got a call from my buddy here, he says, we're going to have a little party at my house. Why don't you come down? Well, I live in Burbank up in the mountains, and he lived in the beach. That was a long ride. I said, do we want to go all that far? Yeah, let's go. We'll go down to Howard's. Drive all the way down to Howard's, park, walk in the front door, and there's kids are playing with this orange track with these loops, and cool cars and everything. I said, what the hell is this? This is cool. I didn't have a kid, so Howard says, yeah, this is what I do. I design all this stuff. And I said, wow. And he says, yeah, but I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I want to work on space stuff, and Matt Mason and all that. And I said, I know a guy that could take your job. So he called me up, said, come on in. The boss wants to interview you. So I had my portfolio, and of course, hot rods and cool cars and stuff. But same thing. It was Elliot Hanlon. I didn't know who it was. I interviewed with him. So I got the job right away. And we sat together for the first couple of weeks, I suppose. I got to do the exhaust on the noodle head. Thanks a lot, Howard. My first job. Yeah, really, a real one. Downhill track, it's a winner, that's for sure. But we extruded the pipes out of an extrusion, and we would get these long strips of clay, and would stick them on the top and move it. We had a model maker that would make the cars for us. So that was my first job, and again, we worked together on that. And who knows, never thought I'd be around for all the years.
And then you met Bob Ross.
And Bob showed up. Who was our first?
It's Bob Rosas, and for all of you who don't know me, I go back, let's see, we graduated from LA Trade Tech in 1962. I have a degree in mechanical drafting, so I was able to use the T-square and triangles and do all this great stuff, and went to work for Southwestern Engineering Company doing pressure vessels, heat exchangers, and stuff like that. Well, a couple of years later, I was drafted into the U.S. Army, and when I came back, what did I do? Let's see, oh yes. I specialized in injection molding and also in die-cast engineering and stuff like that. So somehow I ended up working as a vendor for Mattel in '69, doing the molds and designing molds for some of the, I guess it was a 32 Vicky and 31 Ford Woody and things like that. So they liked my work. I ended up working for Mattel. They hired me and was doing, gosh, Barbie, preschool. Got a patent in preschool for something. I can't remember what it was, but anyhow, did that. And Hot Wheels was around the corner, so I was doing that again. This time in the design phase of it. And gosh, I ended up with a group of about 35 people. At one time, Larry Wood was in my group. I did his reviews. I was his boss. So everybody was his boss at the time, right? So, yeah, it was quite a large group. We did, gosh, Masters of the Universe. We did Wheeled Warriors, steering rigs, scene machines, crack-ups, Real Riders, Thundership 500, Mega Force. You remember that very famous Mega Force? We call it Mega Force. And we did, let's see, Snakebite, Speed Demons, Spider-Man, Web of Terrors, Marvel Heroes, and on and on and on. I got a list probably in my bio that you can look up for the Hot Wheels convention. But I did this for 20 years and decided to go on to do something else, designed appliances for Sub-Zero, Wolf, Maytag, Gen Air, and retired 21 years ago. So that's...
What was your favorite thing that you worked on for Hot Wheels?
Well, I would say gosh, it was probably the GMC motorhome. We took the blueprints from GMC and had to fit it
They were huge.
3 inches long in a package, 3 inches long. So I took out a big chunk of it, and I started collecting those about a couple of years ago, and now I'm up to about 100 different ones. But India has a lot more that I'd like to really have. And if anybody has some extras, give me a ring, give me a call, give me an email, give me a text, anything, whatever they do these days. But that was my favorite.
How about you, Larry? What's your favorite thing that you worked on?
Well, I don't think I have a single favorite, but I do recall one with the first Stow and Go set, the service center, okay? Back that was around 1978. And for those of us that have been around driving cars who recall the oil embargo, everybody lined up for gas, right? So here I am in my cubicle, my drafting table, and I had the prototype model design on the floor next to me. And I had a box, 100 Hot Wheel cars in there. So I decided to line them outside my cubicle, down the one corridor, and down the main corridor, so people walking in can see, what are all these cars doing lined up and why are they making this turn? Well, they come and take a look and they see they're all lined up for gas. So that was one of the fun moments that we kind of did in R&D at the time. R&D, research and design, before it was called design and development later on. So that was one of the fun moments. So there's others, but that was one that comes to mind.
Cool. Howard?
I had a question first.
Bob?
Mike, you mentioned PPD, what is that?
Okay, George Salakas, who passed away this past year, he's the one that started Penang product development in Malaysia. That was Malaysia's answer to what was done in Hong Kong called Far East D&D. Anyway, George started PPD as just a department from the tool shop, MTSB, okay? In Malaysia, there's 3 entities. There's the main factory, MMSB, that you all know, MTSB, the tool shop, and then, of course, what George did as far as PPD, Penang Product Development. Here's an interesting little factoid. You've all heard of MMSB, right? Do you know what it stands for?
Yeah.
Mattel Malaysia, the SB is a suffix. Like in the US, it'd be like Incorporated, LLC. Germany has GmbH. In Malaysia, it's SB. That stands for Ceridian Berhad. So Mattel, the factory, there's really Mattel Malaysia, if you want to call it that. The SB is the suffix because of Malaysian law. Same thing with the tool shop. MTSB, it's really Mattel Tools, but it's MTSB because they had that suffix. When I took over from George, at some point they gave me the tool shop, so now I became one department, development and tooling under one roof, under me. So we decided to rename it MDT. You've heard of that, right? By law in Malaysia, it's really called MDT SB, but I didn't want to call it SB, so I just left it as MDT. And this is one of the shirts. I designed the logo for this as well, so that's my little contribution there. So PPD was Penang Product Development headed by George.
Wow.
Howard?
Oh, I have to go back to the company cab just because I could relate to him so much, and it was really fun because, like I say, Elliot just said, "Show me what you can do." So there's really hardly any restrictions. We got some drawings out so we get the proportions right and everything like that. But that was my favorite. And then the noodle head that seemed to draw.
Is that why you call it
I have to add a little bit to Larry's story. I'm responsible for this guy, and I want a little credit for that.
Or blame.
If he hadn't come to my party, he's such a party animal, there wouldn't be a Mr. Hot Wheels. So, little accolades for the guy here.
That reminds me, when I give a talk to high school kids, I always tell them, be sure to go to parties, and all the teachers' eyes roll up in their heads. So my favorite project, I have a million of them, as you can imagine, but we all know the story of Larry's towing. I thought, it'd be pretty cool to have a business card on a Hot Wheel. So I put my phone number on Larry's Towing. And I thought I'd just, go to a bar and somebody says, what do you do? And reach in and give them a Hot Wheel and say, hey, there's my number, call me someday. I forgot we made $1 million a week. And everything was going along pretty good. We brought them out probably late in the year, and I remember the first phone call was just before Christmas, or maybe it was even at Christmas. Some little kid called early in the morning and says, this is Larry's Towing. Says, does your parents know you're up? No. I said, well, put the toy down and go back to bed, and Santa will bring it to you later. And we started getting phone calls all the time. And that wasn't too bad, except Mattel got calls from all over the United States because I didn't put my area code on it. And one guy called up, a preacher called up and says, hey, we're getting phone calls from all these kids. Can you do something about it? And of course, Mattel said, yeah, we'll take care of it. Another time I got a call from some parent, some dad, and he was checking on his wife. He says, I got all these long distance phone calls. We're just checking to see where they came from. And I says, well, do you have a son? He says, yeah. I says, well, your kid's calling me every day for like a week. So we have that. And of course, Mattel found the offender and sent me a letter that don't do that again. And so that was pretty cool. The funny thing was that a buddy of mine that worked at Barbie put his phone number on Barbie's headboard. So he got caught. He didn't get away with it. So Tom Hodges. Yeah. So that was a fun project. But there were so many fun things we did.
Well, speaking of fun, we've all heard different stories of, you guys working together, and like nobody ever took anything serious, and you were always fooling around. So I'm going to let Howard say his favorite story of.
Oh, that was the serious one. What are you talking about? Yeah. We had a guy on our floor, fourth floor, was the R&D group, Lenny Mokel. And Lenny was a great guy, this big frizzy hair. And we'd see him on TV every Wednesday. He'd go down to boxing matches. But Lenny was fun. He just had a dry sense of humor. So I walked in his office one day and I'm looking up and there's a propeller going around up there. And then a tube was going into this jar with yellow liquid in it. And I said, what's that? He said, that's my urine-powered airplane. And I said, what? I looked up there again. And
it ran forever.
And he said, yeah, I have to take it down once in a while and refuel it and put it back up again. So anyway, what he done, he took a ladder, he went up there, and he moved this propeller around until he got the right draft from the air conditioning and turned the prop. Then he put this little gimmick in there. So that was always kind of fun. But the best story with him was he would come in every morning about an hour early, have his coffee in the LA Times, and sit there and read it. So we went down to a garden supply store and bought a box of ladybugs. And it was guaranteed to have 5,000 ladybugs in it. And what they do is release them in garden areas because the ladybugs would eat the aphids or whatever. So we came in, put this box under his desk, cut the lid off and opened it. And there's 5,000 ladybugs, right? So Lenny comes in, he's reading his LA Times, having his coffee. And we're down the hall and then we hear, what the hell? And he went in. His whole paper was orange. These ladybugs climbing up all of a sudden. And there were ladybugs on that floor for months after that. He went down there and always scooting them out of the way. And then we took his office one time too and closed it up and we went in there and blew up balloons. It took us about 3 hours.
Now who's we?
No.
Who knows? Anybody we could get would do it,
Okay.
Well, it's just we.
Yeah.
Anyway, then when he came, you opened and all these balloons came out. But it was just fun to pick on Lenny because he was such a great guy. So I'll start with that one.
Speaking of that, if you went on vacation in Mattel at the time, you were taking your chances. One time we took a guy's office, took everything out of it, and put a urinal and put a men's room written on his door and everything. He comes back and he walks in there, and like I said, there's a urinal in there, no desk, no nothing before you hit it. So if you went away on vacation, something was going to happen to you.
I have a couple stories to share. One when I was 19 years old in the admin side of Material Control. That's the one that scheduled all the Hot Wheels and everything. when I was working graveyard shift, okay, we had our little departments, QC, production, and so on. And one of the guys did a practical joke for the QC manager who comes in on day shift. So his office is empty. What they did was they took his desk, turned around so it's facing against the wall, literally against the wall. They also took about 5 or 6 rolls of masking tape and taped a big ball around his telephone so he couldn't use it. As a practical joke. We all had a big laugh. But then the manager got even. He got even with this guy. What he did was he sent paperwork into HR to get him demoted. It was legitimate demotion. That was he got even, basically. That's one thing that I recall. I already mentioned as far as the kind of shenanigans that took place in R&D. One was when I was in the preschool group, we did a redo of the power shop. That's like a woodworking power shop with a lathe and everything, but this one was basically a simple flywheel powered, using ice cream sticks to make various things. And one thing that was displayed was this Ford Apache, a beautiful Apache Ford made out of ice cream sticks, basically. And I recall, even as a planner, seeing the designer built this beautiful model of this Ford just for presentation purposes, and he went on vacation. And the design staff, they got even, or they basically played a practical joke, they burned it down, literally burned it down. They took 100 toothpicks, made little arrows, had little arrows all around the Ford Apache, just to, yeah. But they didn't need the model anymore, but that's what they did back then.
And on December 7th, the Japanese workers would come in and glue all your equipment to your desks. So during the day you couldn't work because all your T-squares and your pencils and everything were all glued to your desk.
Wow. How about you, Bob?
No comment. There was some funny times. We had a different relationship with vendors in those days than they do today. You were limited to is what you could get from a vendor. He could take you to lunch. He could take you to see Herb Albert at the forum or wherever he was playing. Not really, but he did. He did, and we got away with it. There was a certain monetary amount that we weren't supposed to pass, but we did. And they would bring us liquor into the vendor rooms, we called them. We were outside the main area, the restricted area, and they brought us bottles of booze. And I remember, man, some of these guys, they got really carried away. And it was a crazy place. But the way they dressed, do you remember Aaron Cohen?
Yeah.
Aaron Cohen. Boy, this was a bald guy. Well, I'm describing a lot of guys that work there now, I guess. But he had a long beard and he dressed like a clown. And
Every day he wore something different.
yes, he drove a Model A.
Yep.
Model A. And just people like that were the real funny things to me that went on.
May I add to the Aaron Cohen story? Like he mentioned, this guy was a character in design, and he basically goofed around for the most part. He didn't really seem to get much work done.
Yeah.
But he had like the pointed goatee like a beatnik, okay? And he had a certain look about him, and like Larry said, he dressed up different every day. So one Halloween, all the designers dressed up as Aaron Cohen.
I have that.
And Aaron dressed up as somebody else.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is somebody told us, they said, Aaron's coming. So we all jumped in the elevator and went down. When the door opened, we're all looking like Aaron, and he wore a suit and a wig, and we didn't even recognize him.
Any of you remember the Christmas ball car we did in 1965? It was chrome, it had a Santa on the top. Any of you recall seeing that?
Kevin Monza,
What's that?
Monza.
The Monza, that's it.
Winter Ball.
Yeah.
That was Aaron Cohen on the roof of that car. He was dressed like a Santa, and he did the artwork for that.
Wow. Howard, you were talking earlier about the elevator.
Oh, yeah. Larry mentioned the elevator. It was the main lobby of Mattel, and then it went up. So we're riding up one day, and the phone rang in the elevator. So I picked it up, and I said, elevator. And then I thought, what number did you call? So they said 324X or whatever it was. And I said, now we had the number for the elevator. So we'd sit down in the lobby, watch people get in the elevator, and then we'd call them. And of course we did things we'd be arrested for now.
Yeah, amen.
Don't get off on the 4th floor, there's a bomb. And you'd see them up there trying to hold the door from opening up. But we'd call girls and ask them for dates, and they'd look like, it's for you in the elevator. Wow, who's calling me? So it was about 2 weeks before they changed the number.
Crazy stuff, man. I wish I'm sure we all wish that we could work there. So what, you guys worked there for long, well, you, of course, the longest time. Now, you've told me stories of when Hot Wheels almost went away. You were the only guy in the building.
Okay, the year of the enamel cars, 72. Okay, 73. So that a year before that is when it started to happen. Mattel got caught at Christmas time hiding cars, saying and Barbies, saying they were selling them, and so they got in trouble for manipulating the stock because the stock was going up. So the stock was like at $50 a share, and in a week it went to 50 cents. The handlers were not probably arrested, but indicted for changing stock, and Mattel was done. They fired 80% of the people, maybe 90% of the people. The parking lot was empty. There was for sales on in the building. There was a realtor that would come every day and look around and try to figure out how he was going to sell the building. I actually looked for a job for a while because I was the only guy on the whole floor. In fact, I set up sizzlers that would run all the way around the whole floor because I had nothing else to do. That's the year I didn't do any cars, I don't think. We just did no tempo, or the cars were enameled, and the building was done. There were a lot of practical jokes that we did because we knew we wouldn't get in trouble. I built a car just to go under the arm where the executives parked. I did it Volkswagen. It was lowered and chopped. I could drive right under the arm and park right in front of my office and look down and see it. But basically, the job was done. There was nobody left. So that was a little scary for a while. And of course, luckily, Mattel somebody got smart enough to say, Barbie and Hot Wheels alone should handle this. So they got a bank to come in and hire somebody to run the company. So that was we came back up, and it came back up fairly fast. We were back in business, and that's when we started hiring more people, and everything got big. But it was gone. There was no two ways about it.
And you guys want to add anything before we ask everybody for questions?
I'm going to tell a story about Howard because he tells stories about me. This was the end of Howard. He was on the ragged edge anyway because he wanted to go out and do his artwork, so he wanted to get fired because he'd get severance pay, So he was trying just about everything. But do you remember the Road King mining set, the vacuum form set that was all mountains and the truck went up and dumped and everything? Well, Howard was in charge of painting that set, the way the thing was done. So I'll let him go from there.
Of course, now it'd all be done on a computer, it'd be easy, but back then I had to paint all of these graphics on a flat piece of plastic. Then they'd put them in the vacuum form machine and suck it up. And the roads would be going up over the top of the mountain, so I'd take it, I'd move them down a few inches and change it. And this went on and on and on. They sent us back to New Jersey to Standard Plastics. I actually worked with the company who's going to produce them. I was back there for about a week. I came back out again, and I'd paint this thing. And I'd literally have to move the road like a half an inch, so I'd have to repaint the whole deal. And it just went on and on and on. And I started getting really crazy because I'd take it down in vacuum form. This is going to be the one. It's going to come out right. Oh, no, the mountain's coming down into the road. So I repainted again, back and forth. This went on for...
I remember him standing on his desk yelling, "I'm bored!"
So anyway, I got laid off about 3/4 of the way through this project. I got the act, so I went out. And about a week later, I get a call and says, hey, Howard, this road set you're working on, nobody knows anything about it. Can you come back and finish it? And I said, yes, I can come back and finish it. How much you gonna pay me? You know? So I came in at about 3 times the money I was making with my salary. So I worked on this road set over and over again. And Larry was, they were suffering. We had an office with 3 of us in there. Larry and I, and Bob Lovejoy. And it made me great, but I finally got it. So I saw one on eBay the other day for $250, and I thought, no, I'm not buying that. I don't want any more.
It's probably less than they paid you. The funny thing is, I was going through some stuff the other day, and I came across the original blueprints of the truck and trailer for the Road King set, so I'm sure you guys would like to see that, so I'll show you that if you come up later. That's the original drawing of it.
And that's done on Mylar, not vellum, but
Yeah, no
plastic.
computers. So the pen on my line.
Yeah, that was all drafting kind of table. Is that the picture of you 2 guys together that we all see?
No, that was early 80s, and that was on the board
That was
too at that time.
funny car, I think, the drawing that we were looking at.
But that was on a drafting table.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you would do with that.
Yeah, but we had, the engineers would do this stuff, or actually Bob would do this part of it. I just did the sketch to make it look good, and he would go over to him. I had to do a drawing to get this to fit it in the package. I had to do an exploded view to tell him how many parts and what the parts cost. But then I would send it over to him to do the final drawings and to go to the model shop to make the wood pattern.
And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I want to get into the tempo printing and like what Howard did, we had to hit and miss, because we couldn't print in some areas that were too deep. And we sometimes ended up cutting the silicone pad that printed the inks, and we were limited on what we could do. And that's why we liked vehicles like the highway haulers and the GMC motorhomes.
Nice and
We had a
flat.
lot of room to print on those things and no distortion. But distortion was really tough.
Yeah, well, that's why we did the grid cars.
Yes.
That's what you've seen, the grid cars, and that would tell us how we could do the artwork.
We had to do that. That shows our limitations. And nowadays, I don't know.
The grid cars, if anyone doesn't know, are the ones that you see in Pascal's book. They have, it's a model of the car in resin or whatever, and it had just a grid. This way, this way, this way, and then you guys
You could see if the grid curved in certain places, and if you wanted to do a straight line, you actually had to curve the straight line.
And if you see Pascal, he might even have a couple, in his room or whatever. They're really cool.
I got one really good story. One time I was messing around, and I had a good friend in the model shop. The model shop was the guys that built all the wood patterns and everything. And I said to him something about the Hot Wheel, the designers are better than the model shop guys. And he said, oh, well, let's do a race. I said, okay, I'll meet you out in the parking lot. And we drew up some rules. You could use any kind of vehicle you wanted. It had to go down the parking lot, and it had to come back to the finish line. Okay, that was the rules. You could use 6 people, because no power, you had to use 6 people. So, okay, so the 2 of us came up with some cars, and our first car was Bob Lovejoy was inventing hang gliders at the time. So he strapped a full-size hang glider on his body, and he had these roller skates with big, colorful wheels, and he had goggles and a helmet on like an aviator back in the 30s, and we had a rope tied to him, and we were going to pull him down one way and then let go of the rope, and then the other 3 guys were going to push him back the other way. Well, Bob was smart enough to line his inside of his shirt and everything with newspapers. So about halfway on the way back, sure enough, he fell down. And we were still pulling him with the rope, and he's dragging along the ground. And those guys had a go-kart chassis, and they just pushed the go-kart chassis back and forth. Okay, that was fun. We had a good time. There were 10 or 15 people came out and watched us and laughed about it. The next year, we said, okay, we're on again. What are we going to do this time? So put the word out. By this time, we had like 4 or 5 departments that wanted to get in on it. And we found the lightest guy we could find, who was a scared little guy. And he said, I don't want to do it, I'm going to get killed. I said, no, it's fine, you're on a go-kart, it's not going to happen. So on his helmet, I put the fin. So he sat in this shark and came up with this big fin on the top. And so I think at that one, we decided there was a pole there in our area, and we hooked up a rope setup that when you pulled it, it pulled the rope 2 to 1. So every foot we moved, we pulled the rope, he moved 2 feet. Well, it sounded good. So sure enough, we get him out there and we comes flying down the track, and he comes around the corner and the rope caught on the pole and it flipped him over. So the poor kid, he didn't get hurt or anything, but we told him, don't worry about it, So by that time, there was a fairly good sized group of people out there watching that. The third year, we were called Visual Design, which was called VD, which was all the art department and everything. So we're trying to figure out what to do. So I made this giant syringe. I was building these things in my driveway. I built this giant syringe with "You Can't Catch VD" on it. And the girls were all dressed the guys were dressed as germs out in front pulling this huge syringe, and the girls were all dressed as nurses running behind. So that was our thing. Nobody cared about winning by that time. It was just, so by that time you had 50, 60 people out there watching this. The third time, there was a joke among us somehow about Porca the killer pig. So I built this big pink pig in my driveway out of paper mache on a go-kart chassis. And somebody sat on the pig, and we dragged him up and down. The fourth year, it got so big, every department showed up. Girls, the Barbie group had a bed with Barbie, a blow-up Barbie on it, and they were all pushing with sticks. And there was a guy that welded like 15 bicycles together with chains and everything. And it just got so out of control. Mattel sent a memo around it. So that's the end of that, because you're using up all our time on the great race. But we were written up on the local newspaper. We were on television and everything. But I tell you what, that was one of the funnest times we ever had.
Awesome.
Catch me, that's horrible.
Yeah, you guys, anybody got any questions? Really?
There we go. That's a good question.
So, Bob, you were affiliated or involved in setting up the Orimat line in Mexico, the Orimat Mexican black walls.
Yes, but only in a paperwork sense, nothing. I didn't restrict them from doing anything, it's just moving tools and arranging which cars they would be.
Does any of you, preceding Orimat was the Mexican company CIPSA that did Redlines under license. And no one that I've ever spoken to at Mattel has a clue how that happened.
It would have been out of our department. We just did the design. They told us
They
what
were
to
your
send.
car.
Yeah. Just make them in Mexico. No big
So
deal.
no knowledge.
Wasn't there an embargo or something at the time where they could only send parts? They couldn't send a complete car, and they had to assemble it there? Is that?
Didn't hear that.
No? I thought, there's a lot of weird stories, but
The situation was the Pan American trade laws precluded any of the South American companies from importing finished toys.
right, yeah, that's,
So it wasn't just Mexico, all the Pan American companies had that agreement. So that's why Orimat had to set up the factory in Mexico.
so the parts were brought over, and then they
I
assembled
think
them. Or did they
by then
make
it
the parts
was
there?
tools.
Did they make them there? Did they make the parts there and then assemble them
Yes,
there, or
they
did they get the parts from somewhere else?
They made the parts.
Orimat was completely Mexican made.
So we just sent the tools?
They sent the tools. And that's why some of the materials were so brittle, paint so cracked up and peeling. It wasn't our quality standards.
And what about Leo? How
Same
were
thing
those
there,
made?
we sent them the tools and they have free license to do what they want. They use some of our Tampo, but mostly they make their own.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
We had so many different departments at Mattel that I could see why we were destined for layoffs, because we were just fat. Too many people.
Okay.
Except for Hot Wheels, because nobody thought they were gonna do anything. So they just left me on the desk for 20 years.
Awesome. Any other questions?
When you start from your drawing to release of it, how long does it take, and is it faster or slower than it is today?
My version was always, it took a year from the idea here till you could get it on the shelf. You can imagine with all the computers and all the SLA parts and everything, it's got to be a lot shorter now, and Brendan would be able to tell you that a lot better.
No, it's not.
Still.
I mean, it's a bigger system. We're doing more, so there's more vehicles, but we're already working on 2027.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it still takes around the same time, just because the logistics of designing something, developing it, getting it tooled, getting it approved. If we have licensor involvement, they got to approve the sculpt, they got to approve the deco, they got to approve the package. There's shipping, and just the logistics of so many vehicles, assortments, many collections, distribution. It's quite complex.
Speaking of licensing, we in the beginning we could do anything we wanted. We'd just throw any logo on it. Nobody cared. Ford didn't care. GM didn't care. Nobody cared. And then I worked on the ZZ Top Coupe with the guy that was building it. And a little story on that is they wanted 2 Z's on the side of this beautiful hot rod. And I said, I'm not putting 2 Z's on the side of that beautiful car. So somebody else designed the Z's because I didn't know what it was going to be. But I did the car and I put the Z's on the side. We made it and everything was going fine, except ZZ Top has a lawyer. I mean, he has a lawyer. So he came in one day and told us to cease and desist and catch the guy that did that. You owe us a lot of money, and that was the beginning of the end for licensing. Now we can't even do a wheel without a license. So that ended up in the whole department all by itself.
We're talking about licensor approval. My first year in Malaysia, 2000, one of the cars we did, I think it was Phil Reelman's car, the Mini Cooper. Remember that car from 2000? Well, designers sometimes like to do their own little changes on some of these cars. And I think Phil, in the passion for the car, tried to make it look like more like the original Mini Cooper, which is a very boxy, square-looking vehicle. And that's what we did. We made the pattern 3-to-1 that was this boxy-looking Mini Cooper. So, of course, we make the 1-to-1 model, send it to headquarters for license approval, and BMW was all upset. What did you do to my car? This is not the Mini Cooper we made. This is from something else. And so we put our heads together. What we want to do, we took our 3-to-1 pattern, we took it through a bandsaw, okay, and cut it up so we can narrow it a little bit. So we redid it as far as that goes. So licensor approval is important, and we do it in complete. So.
Yeah. An interesting story on that is I was doing the beginning of the NASCAR series, and we had to get the information from Detroit from all the different cars they were running for NASCAR, and of course they would modify them. And so one day the blueprints came in, our model shop built the car, and the car was like a banana. It was all curved. And geez, this doesn't look right. Straighten it out, bondo it up, clean it all up, make it out straight. We sent it to Ford, and they called back and said, thanks for not sending our millions of dollars worth of research on our NASCAR cars out to the public, because that was what they were building. They were building the cars as a banana to go around the corners. So that was something we didn't even realize.
Brendan, you now, than before, is there much difference between the way that they worked and that you guys work now?
Some things are very different. I mean, the end result is the same to build a cool die-cast car. But, I mean, now we have the internet, so I don't have to go and draw a 69 Camaro. I can find a picture of it. I can Photoshop the wheel larger. I can Photoshop a blower on the front, whatever it is. And then we can do a digital sculpt. We can buy digital sculpts from places online. We don't have to scan a model. We don't have to build a wooden pattern 3 times the size and pantograph it down. We can direct, 3D print something right in our office. We don't have to ship a pattern in a FedEx box overseas. We can transfer it immediately. So that there are some things that change, but we don't have to make great cars because we can do all that stuff.
Even the sheets, we did the original, we would hand paint 4 times up artwork for the car and make a film and then send the film in the mail to China to to make the plates. And now, ever since e-sheets came along, they would just send all the digital files and everything. But one day I was going through the trash at Mattel. I just was looking. And I found a box of a whole year's worth of the films. This was really cool. I was looking at all those old films and everything. So you never know what you found.
Awesome.
You know where they went.
I want to talk about the importance of making the brass models. Because
Yeah.
they, in the old days, you had to be able to test every car on the tracks. I happened to end up with about 24 of them, Noodlehead being one of them.
Brass
And,
That's a way of
so I
toss.
was-
He
and,
happened to end up with.
Well, they would throw them away, right? Well, yeah, they would.
It was in a wastebasket. It was right in front of me. So I couldn't let it go. And anyhow, I still have a dozen or so of them that I maintain, like the hand-painted models. A guy named Hodaka.
Dakota.
Hakoda. He could paint on a pinhead. You just,
You can write
Nobody liked
Goodyear
it.
in that. Like, you've seen them.
Tiny.
They're only that long. He can write that out perfect.
yes.
For all our toy show models.
So the hand-painted models, I think, are far, far undervalued because they just were fantastic.
Now, how were those cut? Were they done with a ridge core, or were they hand cut and then filed and?
The original wooden patterns were what they call pantographed down to 4 times. And so once we got that, we made rubber molds, and we could make as many cars off those as we wanted for Toy Fair, for catalog pictures, all that
So
kind
you
of
would
stuff.
pour the brass in the molds to make. Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they would do this, that, and with them, when you were making the toy show models, they were solid. If you remember, if you see the toy show models, the windows are painted and stuff, when the brass was completely empty.
As you know, we did graphic changes year after year after year on the same car. Well, by then we could use the metal parts, just hand paint the metal parts, change the colors. But,
Bob, some of your brasses are kind of crude examples of the model, and then some of them are like immaculately, as though they were fully pantographed. Were they handmade originally, and then they gradually?
they were all handmade, nothing machined from, pantographed from a model or anything. They were handmade. So if they were pretty close,
In other words, what's the difference between an acetate and a resin?
the acetate is what the model maker actually carved the model out of. He made a handmade model, much like that, handmade brass, but it would acetate. And then from that, we would duplicate and make more parts.
So an acetate
valuation.
is something you would machine, whereas a resin you would cast.
Pour.
You cast the
Yes.
resin.
So the acetate was used to make a mold, and then you pump out as many resins
Yes.
as you needed for campos and things.
So I know there's several personal cars you guys have done in die-cast. I guess my question is, how many of your personal vehicles did you actually design into?
I've probably done 6 or 8. I've got them in my shop, with the real car in there. So, yeah, I stuck my Nash and my hot rod, a few of my hot rods, but I think we did the other cars for guys I'm sure Brendan does a few.
65 Mustang was one. 65 Mustang,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
which I own.
I'm curious, did you show up at Ford in your Corvette?
Yeah, that's funny. Ford wouldn't let us park close, so we parked in the back with the Corvettes. We had a club called the Kofomoco Ford Corvette Owners of Ford Motor Company, and we had business cards and everything, and we would park out in the back. And then a little funny story on that is one of the guys had a Jaguar XKE, real nice Jaguar, and we went out one day and took tape and taped his windshield, and then laid a rock in the middle of the windshield like somebody. We called him up and said, "Some kid threw a rock on your windshield." He comes running out, and with this, we could make anything at Mattel. I mean, at Ford, and had all this cracked windshield and everything. We always played jokes like that. And Howard was telling one about his car once. Logo they put on it.
Oh, yeah. I was right. When I hired into Ford, I had a 63 Dodge Dart, and it was just a 63 Dodge Dart. That's all you can remember. So I hired into Ford, and a good friend of ours, Ken Aberts, who's passed away, he made these logos and put them on the front of my car. It said, Silly Goose. And I drove that thing around for months and months and months and months before I ever saw that logo. But I just thought that was cool. I didn't ever get any of my personal cars done because I was newly married. I had kids that are 2 and 4, and I had one of the first Toyota station wagons. So nobody wanted that.
We should do one. Howard's first car.
The Japanese cars are coming back into vogue. And the dinner car, that's right. But nobody wanted a Toyota station wagon back then.
You did one of yours, right?
What's that?
You did one of yours, didn't you?
I didn't do a car. I have one personal Hot Wheels item that I did. That's a non-car. Okay. I'd like to come up there and share. I have a show and tell that I'd like to show you. In fact, something's going to go on for the auction as well. So, like I said, I went to Malaysia in 2000, and back then we were doing cars the conventional way, making 3-1 patterns and so on. You need a microphone?
Yes.
There's one right there if you want it.
Okay.
I got you.
About this. This is my entry into the custom car contest with the diorama. Anyway, you've all seen the standard Hot Wheels display case. It's been around forever, right? So here I'm in Malaysia, in my office. I'm talking to my engineers. I'm saying, you know what? Let's redesign this thing. Let's do something different. Okay. So I just gave them verbal instructions, and they all knew CAD. And this is what we're doing, digital stuff. So I said, make it a full radius on the sides, and make the clear part a full spherical radius, okay? So they did that for me, and they showed me the CAD file, and I liked it. And so what we did was, this is the first 3D model of the part that I wanted, okay? This represents the clear part, and this is the bottom of the base. And I told my guys, you know what, let's make the base at an angle. Let's give it a compound angle so a car stands in a different attitude. And my inspiration for that was, if any locals here in Southern California, okay, the 405 freeway past the 110, Cormier Chevrolet, you can see it from the freeway. Big sign, Cormier Chevrolet, you can they have either a new car, a Corvette or a Camaro, on a ramp at an angle. And that was my inspiration for wanting this thing to be on an angle anyway. So this is a 3D print of my part. Here's the first shot of my part with the base. Notice the color, the typical, beige color that was used. That goes back to Malaysia before the plant was doing Hot Wheels. They did body product. So they had a whole warehouse full of this color plastic that was used for the early Hot Wheels as far as the interiors and stuff. And they just kept it ever since. So all the first shots you see with this color, that's why. So typical first shot is nothing polished, so that's just the part. It's like so. Second shot, this is the right color black base and the little red roses from the housing. And then of course the final part, all nice and cleaned up. So this is my non-Hot Wheels car, one of. Okay. This, by the way, as a bundle, is going to go for auction later on. So have fun with that. So in 2004 or 5, I headed up a tech summit in Malaysia. We invited people all over the world to participate in technology sharing. At the time it was CAD. We were just moving more toward CAD development for Hot Wheels. We went away from the standard conventional way to all digital. It took me 3 years to get to it, but we did that. And so, as you know, we have a lot of the employee type cars. People come to Asia, we set up some cars, give them to them. So for the tech summit, I had this car put in my display case. What's that? I looked at all the cars we were making at the time, said which one looks kind of cool or techy, so I chose this one to go in the set. And it happens I have a toy keychain collection home to, put a loop on it. Let's make it a keychain as well, just for fun. And of course, on the back here, this is a little small version of the poster for the Tech Summit. That was done in 2005, and the MDT logo that I designed back when I was in Malaysia. So I have 3 of these. They're also going to go for auction later on today. So have fun with that.
Cool.
The second item I have is every year or so, we have a Hot Wheels task force. A group of people, headquarters, would come to Malaysia. We do workshops, brainstorming, share stories, basically information sharing, best practices, that sort of thing. And so we'd always put together a car inside, to give away to the people that are there. So one year I decided I put the Hot Wheels logo to fit just inside my display case. That's what we gave out. So there was 100 or so of these made, I forget which, and just the diecast logo. And so what I did was, this is where I gave my guys a sketch. This is my original sketch for this part. Making it look about that size, you can see how I want to sit at an angle. I gave some dimensions to show how to do a little bit of the recess in there. All right? And so they came back, and my mom shop in Malaysia made this for me. So this is a prototype of the logo that we're going to make a mold of and shoot die cast. That's what that is. And then I have in here a painted die cast logo and the raw first shots, or first shot of the Hot Wheels diecast logo. So this prototype stuff is also going for auction as a bundle. So anyway, that's something else I thought I'd share. But that's my one contribution.
Thank you. I guess we've been here long enough, right? Everybody good? Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I hope it was informative to all of you and for all of you. And thanks for your question.
Thank you, Mike.
From 2007, again, back then it was original traditional development. I went to full digital, so then we stopped making 3D models, everything digital, and blue cards. At one point, we even stopped making blue cards, and we didn't want that.